Pete Buttigieg is one of my favorite voices out there. Anytime Pete's talking, I always want to listen because I love to hear his take on things. And we've been talking a whole lot about JD Vance here on the channel ever since Donald Trump chose him as his running mate. We realized that if Donald Trump was to be reelected, then that means JD Vance is next in line to be president of the United States one day. And that should absolutely terrify anybody who's actually paid attention to the things that JD Vance has said and done. But we can always count on Pete Buttigieg to just knock it out of the park. And that's what he does in this next clip. I think you're going to love his take on JD Vance. Take a look.
Folks who say, what's going on with some of these Silicon Valley folks veering into Trump world with JD Vance and backing Trump? What are they thinking? Silicon Valley is supposed to be, they're supposed to care about climate. They're supposed to be, I don't know, pro-science and rational and libertarians. So normally libertarians don't like authoritarians. What's up with that? I think it's actually, we've made it way too complicated. It's super simple. These are very rich men who have decided to back the Republican Party that tends to do good things for very rich men.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And by the way, that's kind of what you're getting with. That's kind of what you're getting with JD, right? So I knew a lot of people like him when I got to Harvard. I found a lot of people like him who would say whatever they needed to get ahead. And 5 years ago, that seemed like being the anti-Trump Republican. So that's what he was. Talked about how he was unfit, how he was cynical, called him an opioid, which is kind of a weird thing to say about a person, but definitely a really... But I mean, for somebody whose identity is that they're connected to Appalachia, which has an opioid crisis, that really is the darkest thing you could possibly say about Donald Trump, at least in public. But behind the scenes, apparently, he's actually calling him Hitler, right? Seriously. 5 years later, the way he gets ahead is that he's the greatest guy since sliced bread. And I actually watched this exact same process with somebody else I got to know in my days in the Midwest, which was my former governor, Mike Pence, who I watched start out as an evangelical Christian who cared about rectitude and family values, and then get on board with a guy who was mixed up with a porn star, make excuses for him, so that he could have power. And then he did. He got 4 glorious years, I guess, as vice president of the United States. And it ended on the west front of the Capitol with Trump supporters proposing that he be hanged for using the one shred of integrity he still had to stand up to an attempt to overthrow the government. Right. So I guess, maybe not as a politician, but as a human being, what I'll say is that I hope things work out a little bit better for JD Vance than they did for Mike Pence.
I agree with Pete 100% on this one because JD Vance is definitely the kind of guy that just says whatever he has to say at that particular moment to get ahead. He just says whatever is cool at that particular moment because back when it was cool to be an anti-Trump Republican, he saw through it. And he said that he felt like that Donald Trump was exploiting the people here in Appalachia. There's no way that if you really truly felt that way, that you could live through Donald Trump's presidency and see what he did to the people here in Appalachia. There's no way that you could see what happened on January 6th and beyond and then suddenly come around and be his running mate, unless you were just saying whatever it took at that particular moment to get ahead. Because we all saw through Donald Trump back in 2015, 16. We realized what was coming our way. And when we saw it, we didn't like what we saw. And then we saw what happened on January 6th, and we really didn't like it. And we've been seeing this insanity ever since and calling it out as such. So we're not just saying whatever it takes to be cool at the particular moment. I'm not cool in my part of the world, okay? I'm really not. I'm not a popular figure here anymore. I used to be a musician that could play anywhere in town, and I don't anymore because of the stances that I've taken. But I've took them because I came to a point in my life where I said to myself, you know what? Democracy is more important than me sitting on a bar stool playing my acoustic guitar and somebody dropping a tip in my bucket to hear me sing a Skinner tune again. You know, I've done that enough. The world doesn't need to hear it again. I would much rather be over here dying on this hill because I feel like that our democracy is that important, that it was too important of a time to not be talking. So there's no way you could live through Trump's presidency. If you felt that way, then live through his presidency, then see everything that's happened since. There's no way you could switch sides unless you were just someone who would say the right thing at the right moment to get ahead. And that's exactly what JD Vance has done. And Pete is right when he talks about how that it's funny that he referred to Trump as an opioid because we do have a crisis here in Appalachia. And that's something that that would be a big slur to call anyone because people in this part of the world will refer to opioids as those devils in the mountains. I mean, that's what they will call it in this part of the world. We all see the carnage that the opioid crisis has left behind, and we've all felt it at some point in time, either directly or indirectly. We've either dealt with it ourselves, we've either battled addiction ourselves, or we've had a loved one that has. So it is funny that he would call him that, considering that he's a guy that came from a home that, you know, he had to rise above his mother and her drug addiction. But there's one thing I would like to point out about this whole thing. This is why, as someone who's still recovering, I take such offense at JD Vance and the way that MAGA goes about talking about addiction. They stood up and applauded JD Vance's mother at the RNC. I ain't got a problem with that. You know, if she's got clean in her life, I wish her well, wish her the best. I know how hard it is, and I hope she does good. I can say that. But the other side didn't say that when it came to Hunter Biden. When it came to Hunter Biden, they found a way to demonize Joe Biden, comforting him in rehab. They found a way to take a moment like that, someone's darkest moment, and exploit that for their own political gain. And so that's why I really have such a problem with MAGA and the way that they go about things. They politicize everything, and then they try to gaslight us and tell us it's us doing it. But we're not. We're simply bringing the receipts and pointing these things out. And folks, there's a whole lot we could talk about with JD Vance. We've all saw the memes floating around. If you haven't done it yet, just Google JD Vance's couch cushion, and you can thank me later or you can cuss me later, whichever one you prefer. We saw all of those things. But I'm not going to shame the guy for those things. What I'm going to say is that it's things like this next clip that deeply disturbs me about him. And this is why I have a huge bone to pick with JD Vance. Take a look at this.
A 17-year-old boy saw no one protecting the businesses, the people in his community. So he went down there and did it. And instead of rewarding it, instead of saying, you know, isn't it good that a 17-year-old kid who was raised by a single mother made good decisions and decided to be a positive force in his community? They slandered and lied about him. They treated basic manly virtue as white supremacy. And I think you're exactly right. It's not just about Kyle Rittenhouse. It's about what kind of young men do we want to raise in our communities? What kind of virtues do we want our leaders to promote? Certainly not the people who are burning Kenosha, Wisconsin down. We want to promote the types of virtues that exist in Kyle Rittenhouse.
They want to promote the virtues that are found in Kyle Rittenhouse. That tells you everything you need to know about him, and anyone that agrees with a statement like that, that tells you everything that you need to know about them as well. Folks, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. When it comes to Kyle Rittenhouse and that whole thing, I judge people based on their response to that. I truly do. And if I see you defending him, my respect level drops, and I don't care one bit to say it. I do not care, because I sat back and watched that all unfold, and I know what I saw with my own eyes. I don't have to have Joe Rogan break it down for me like he always tries to do. I saw what happened with my own eyes. I saw this kid go to a town that he had no business being in. His mother dropped him off, and he takes an assault rifle and walks down the street with it with gloves on his hands. And I promise you, if he'd have been a black kid, he wouldn't have made it 2 steps with that weapon. But he suddenly become a vigilante, and the biggest problem that I had with it is that people in my part of the world sat back on their couch eating Cheetos and lived vicariously through that little prick. That's exactly what they did. And this idea that they want to raise their kids to be that, they want to raise their kids to do that kind of thing, tells you exactly who they are as people. And speaking of being a musician who used to play request for tips, I'll go ahead and play another hit for you. I'll go ahead and repeat this one. I've said this before, said it in several videos, but I would much rather play this hit again as Mustang Sally. So here we go. The protest that happened back in 2020 was the voice of the unheard, not condoning the violence, but it was the voice of the unheard. Kyle Rittenhouse should have stopped and asked himself, what are these people protesting? Why are they protesting? Maybe he should have listened to black people and hear about their struggles and what they were going through instead of trying to take matters into his own hands. But that was a protest of the unheard. January 6th was not the protest of the unheard, because those people's voices were heard in a free and fair election, and they couldn't accept the fact that they lost. They bought into every conspiracy theory under the sun that they could, and they still are to this day, and they'll do it again come this November. When Joe Biden is reelected, they'll do it all over again. They're already sowing the groundwork for it now by saying that the only way that Trump could ever lose is for it to be rigged. But I would much rather sit here in this chair and repeat these talking points over and over and keep trying to drive the truth home as to sit and sing music for a bunch of people who are drunk and talking so loud that I can't hear myself think. So I'm much happier in this chair. To anyone who used to watch me play music in my part of the world, and you're like, Brando, we miss you out at the bar. Well, you know what? I miss it too. I mean, I miss the band, and I miss playing, and I miss feeling the rumble of the bass under my feet when I'm playing, the cymbals ringing in my ears when the night's over. I love that part of it. But I don't miss the traveling from one place to the other to just be set up in the corner underneath a TV where they're playing Fox News behind me, and I've got to play to a crowd that's just zoned out and playing cornhole and playing darts, and you're just background music to them. I don't want to be background music anymore. I want to be saying what matters, and I want to be saying it out loud, and I want to be saying it up front where people can hear me. And that's why I thank everyone who has subscribed to this channel and followed me along on this ride. It's been quite a transition for me in my life to go from being that to this, but I appreciate it. So if you haven't already and you like what you've heard, hit that subscribe button. And if you ever get tired of it, unsubscribe and go somewhere else. I'm not going to twist your arm to be here. I'm not going to always get it right, and I will admit when I get it wrong, but I truly appreciate all of your all's support. And so be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share these videos with your friends if you like what I have to say. And I really appreciate you for coming along on this journey with me. But yeah, I'm going to be sitting right here in this chair, calling out people like JD Vance and judging people that defends Kyle Rittenhouse, and I will not apologize for it.